Those in the public eye often appear to have it all: money, power, and a fixed place in the history books. With so much attention on them, it's difficult to fathom how they can suddenly up and disappear from public life, and yet some such people do, leaving behind the puzzle pieces of a mystery that never seem to quite fit together. Join us for today's episode as we examine the cases of two high-profile people who are still missing today. Heinrich Müller. Heinrich Müller was born in Munich in 1900 in what was known then as the Kingdom of Bavaria, a state in the German Empire. At the age of 19, and following the end of the First World War, Müller joined the Bavarian police as an auxiliary worker, where he helped to suppress communist uprisings. He adopted a hatred for the communist ideology after viewing the shootings of hostages by the Red Army during the Bavarian Soviet Republic. As a police officer, Müller was known to be thorough and dedicated to his cause of quashing communism, and it was this diligence that saw him rise through the ranks at a rapid rate. His time in the police force also allowed him to become acquainted with members of the Nazi Party, including prominent figures such as Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich, both high-ranking SS members credited with the creation of the Holocaust. Despite being known to such individuals, Müller maintained support for the Bavarian People's Party, a Catholic democratic party, and advocated for the use of force against the Nazis in early 1933. However, once the Nazis seized power, his opinions changed. Müller was sought out by the likes of Heydrich, who knew that he was very familiar with the communist movement in Germany, and his knowledge was in high demand. By late 1933, he had been promoted to criminal inspector of the police. Müller remained a high-ranking police official throughout the Third Reich. During most of the Second World War, he was the chief of the Gestapo, and he played a major role in the planning and execution of the Holocaust. However, he vanished following Adolf Hitler's suicide in April of 1945, and to this day, he remains the most senior and high-ranking Nazi Party member who was never captured nor confirmed to be dead. Müller was last seen on the evening of May 1st, 1945, the day following Hitler's death, when he told the Führer's pilot, "We know the Russian methods exactly. I haven't the faintest intention of being taken prisoner by the Russians." Following this, he vanished. Decades later, in 2001, the CIA released their file on the Nazi Party member, detailing several attempts by US agencies to locate Müller alive or to recover his body. However, despite these numerous efforts, no trace of him was found. The US Office of Strategic Services, a precursor to the CIA, spent months following the end of the war trying to find Müller, including raiding the home of his mistress, but had no success in locating him. The search was in part hindered by the fact that his name was very common in Germany at the time, and there was even another SS general named Heinrich Müller. He was reportedly dubbed Gestapo Müller to distinguish him from the other general. The search for Müller wound down in the late 1940s as the rise of the Cold War began to take precedence. Officials in the US and UK suspected that he was likely dead anyway, although the British Royal Air Force Special Investigation Branch continued to try and pursue him to hold him accountable for the Stalag Luft III murders, in which members of the Gestapo committed war crimes against Allied prisoners in March of 1944. Over the years, numerous theories and supposed sightings have been put forward. SS member and head of foreign intelligence in Nazi Germany, Walter Schellenberg, wrote that Müller had defected to the Soviet Union following Hitler's demise. He also alleged that a German officer who was taken prisoner by the Soviets claimed to have seen Müller in Moscow in 1948, adding that the SS leader died a short time later. However, these allegations have never been backed up with concrete evidence, and Schellenberg never named the witnesses, so they could not be traced and questioned. Meanwhile, Adolf Eichmann, an SS officer and organizer of the Holocaust, was captured in 1960 by Israeli intelligence forces. He told them that he believed Müller was still alive, but was unable or unwilling to provide any substantial information about where he might be. The Allies subsequently placed several of Müller's family members and associates under surveillance in order to try and track him down, but no leads came from this. In the subsequent years, numerous reports were sent to the West German police claiming that Müller's body had been buried in the days after Berlin was captured in 1945, but many of the reports were contradictory and their sources unreliable, making it impossible to verify any of them. In 1961, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Goleniewski, the deputy chief of Polish military counterintelligence, defected to the US. In the late 40s and early 50s, he had spent time interrogating German officials and revealed that he had been told that Müller had been captured between 1950 and 1952 by the Soviets, who had taken him to Moscow. Though the CIA attempted to track down the man that he identified in his story, they were never found. 6 years later, a man in Panama City was identified by Müller's wife as her long-lost husband. However, fingerprinting revealed that he was not, in fact, the Gestapo leader, and the man was subsequently released. The CIA ultimately concluded that there were strong indications but no proof that Müller had both collaborated with the Soviets and that he had died in Berlin. They believed that if he survived the collapse of the Third Reich, he was being harbored within the USSR, but when the USSR dissolved in 1991, there was no evidence to support this theory. In 2013, a historian named Johann Tuchel claimed to have solved the mystery once and for all. He stated that he'd come across documents about Müller's death while investigating a massacre the Nazi official had ordered. This investigation led him to re-examine evidence from a post-war gravedigger located in East Germany, who recalled burying a man in general's uniform in the Berlin Mitte Jewish cemetery in 1945. The claim was never thoroughly examined at the time by East German police, but Tuchel claims to have explored documents and military decorations left with the body, as well as data from German and US intelligence agencies, to conclude that the man who was buried was Müller. The cemetery in which he was allegedly buried was desecrated by the Nazis during the Third Reich, and was the site of at least 16 mass graves. Today, it is a Jewish memorial. Dieter Graumann, the president of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, reported being outraged and shocked by the discovery, if true. He stated that such a brutal Nazi sadist is buried in a Jewish cemetery of all places is a tasteless monstrosity. The memory of victims is being heavily trampled on. If Müller is buried in the cemetery, we will likely never know, as the location of the grave is unknown. Heinrich Müller's whereabouts remain unclear to this day. Ray Gricar. Born in 1945 in Cleveland, Ohio, Ray Gricar had a comfortable upbringing, attending a prestigious Catholic school before enrolling at the University of Dayton. Following an internship at a prosecutor's office, he became interested in pursuing a law degree and would eventually obtain one at the Case Western Reserve University School of Law. During the 1980s, he opted to become a stay-at-home dad to his young daughter, but shortly afterwards took a position as an assistant to the Center County District Attorney, David Grine. In 1985, he ran for Grine's position and successfully won. Ray was elected time and time again over the next 20 years, managing to maintain his popularity throughout the span of his entire career. He was known to be ethical, strong-minded, and hard-working, with one of his friends and a former Montour County DA recalling, "He was the most serious prosecutor I've ever met. He was the most serious guy, the most ethical guy." In 2004, Ray decided not to run for re-election, as he hoped to retire in December 2005, just after his 60th birthday. But he never made it to retirement. It seemed that fate had other plans. Ray was last heard from at 11:30 a.m. on April 15th, 2005. At the time, he was living with his girlfriend, Patty Fornicola, in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and he'd taken a half day at work and was now out enjoying a long drive before he planned to return home. He called Patty to let her know that he was driving through Brush Valley, northeast of Center Hall in Pennsylvania. But Ray never made it back to the house, and Patty contacted the authorities later that night to file a missing persons report. She would later recall, "To me, it was an emergency. This was not like him. It's unusual behavior." Ray's car, a red Mini Cooper, was discovered the following day inside the car park of an antiques store in Lewisburg. Notably, there was no sign of the 59-year-old, nor any indications of a struggle or foul play, but investigators were able to determine that several items were missing, including his laptop, keys, and wallet. His county-issued mobile phone had been left behind, and the car smelled strongly of cigarette smoke. Ash was found in the passenger seat, even though Ray was not known to be a smoker. Even more striking, as far as family members were concerned, was the location of the car, which was adjacent to two bridges of the Susquehanna River. It bore a close resemblance to where Roy Gricar, Ray's older brother, left his vehicle before taking his own life in 1996. Roy had vanished in May that year from his home in West Chester, Ohio, and his body was discovered a week later in the Great Miami River. His death was ruled as suicide. In the following days, an extensive search was carried out in the area where the Mini was recovered. Scent dogs were utilized, the banks of the river combed through, and divers were even brought in to scour the water, yet there was no sign of Ray. The FBI stepped in to assist, analyzing his bank records, credit card history, and mobile phone records, but there was nothing suspicious amongst them, and nothing to indicate where Ray had gone. Later, several witnesses reported seeing the 59-year-old at the antiques store that day with an unidentified dark-haired woman. However, these sightings have never been confirmed, and the woman has never been traced. No evidence was found that would indicate he was having an affair. Several months later, on July 30th, fishermen near the Susquehanna River stumbled across Ray's laptop beneath a bridge between Lewisburg and Milton. Immediately, it was noticed that the equipment's hard drive was missing, which was rather odd. Divers combed through the nearby body of water in search of the missing item, but it wasn't found for another 2 months. In September, a passerby found it on the bank of the river, about 100 yards from where the laptop had been located. Unfortunately, however, it was so badly damaged that neither the FBI, the US Secret Service, nor data recovery firm Kroll OnTrack were able to pull any information from it. There has been very little movement in Ray's case since. In 2009, 4 years after he vanished, investigators revealed that prior to his disappearance, someone had used the computer at the home he shared with Patty to search the internet for things like how to wreck a hard drive, how to fry a hard drive, and water damage to a notebook computer, suggesting that Ray himself was responsible for the damage done to his laptop and hard drive, rather than it being carried out by an ill-intentioned third party. Another 2 years later, in 2011, his daughter petitioned Center County to declare her father dead. He was declared dead in absentia on July 25, 2011. Just 1 day later, however, there was intense speculation that Ray had been found when a man bearing a striking resemblance to the attorney was apprehended for trespassing in Utah. The man declined to share his name, but was the same height and weight as Ray, had similar facial features, and even shared some of the same wrinkles. But the speculating came to an end when the man's fingerprints were run against Ray's, only for it to be discovered they were not a match. The man was later identified by investigators as Philip Todd Beavers. There are numerous theories as to what happened to Ray Gricar on the day of his disappearance. Many internet sleuths believe that the 59-year-old died by suicide, with some pointing to the eerie location where he left his car. Others have suggested that perhaps his decision not to prosecute a specific case finally took its toll on him, mentally and emotionally. In 1998, Ray opted not to press charges against Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky, following numerous allegations of child sexual abuse. Sandusky worked at Penn State between 1969 and 1999, and even after retiring, he maintained an office at the university until 2011. That year, he was arrested and charged with 52 counts of sexual abuse of young boys over a 15-year period between 1994 and 2009. Having met his victims through the non-profit charity he founded in 1977, named The Second Mile, which worked with at-risk youth. He was found guilty on 45 of the 52 charges in the summer of 2012 and sentenced to between 30 and 60 years in prison. He is currently 81 years old and is still in prison at the state correctional institution Laurel Highlands. Police have theorized that Ray took his own life, although his family disagreed, stating that he had no mental health problems and had never had issues with depression or suicidal ideation. He was reportedly looking forward to his upcoming retirement, and he and Patty had already started making plans that included driving across the country, visiting national parks, and ending up on the West Coast, where they would visit his adult daughter. The other theory suggested was that Ray had plotted to start a new life elsewhere, and abandoning his car and his laptop were just part of the plan. According to some reports, he had expressed interest in the case of a Cleveland police officer who'd vanished in order to start afresh. Notably, there were several witness sightings of Ray after he vanished, a few of which occurred at a bar in Wilkes-Barre, a city in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. One of the witnesses to this was a police officer who claimed to have seen the 59-year-old engrossed in a baseball game that was being played on television. Over the years, there has also been speculation that Ray went to Europe as he was fluent in Slovenian and had relatives in the country, and was semi-fluent in Russian. He had visited such areas of Europe in the past. The third and final theory in Ray's case is that he was the victim of foul play, with some suggesting that his disappearance is linked to the unsolved death of an assistant U.S. attorney named Jonathan Luna. Jonathan worked in Baltimore, Maryland, and on the night of December 5, 2003, he left court, crossed into Delaware, where he withdrew $200 from an ATM before he drove into Pennsylvania. His toll ticket from 4:04 a.m. had blood on it, suggesting that by this time he was already injured. He parked his car around the back of a drilling company's building in Denver, Pennsylvania, but it was then later driven to a nearby creek. The car was found at 5:30 a.m. by an employee of the drilling company, with blood all over the driver's door and the left front of the car. Jonathan's body was lying face down in the water beneath the car's engine. He was still dressed in his suit, jacket, and court ID. He had been stabbed 36 times with his own pocket knife around the chest and neck and had suffered a head injury, but his cause of death was found to be drowning. Jonathan's case is the most perplexing, as investigators have never been able to determine whether or not his injuries were caused by himself or another party. No suspects or motives were ever established, and the FBI ruled it a suicide, in part due to the lack of defensive wounds and the presence of what is known as hesitation wounds. However, several coroners who examined the case ruled it as a homicide, and notably, a second blood type, as well as a partial print not belonging to Jonathan, were recovered during evidence collection. Additionally, he left behind his phone and his glasses, which he needed to see properly while driving in the dark, at his desk in Baltimore, and blood that was pooled in the back seat of the vehicle suggested that he had been sitting there wounded while someone else drove. The case has never been solved, and the investigation is still active today. Returning to Ray's case, some theorized that his disappearance was related to a recent case of his that involved him prosecuting criminals linked to a heroin-dealing ring. It was suggested that the criminals involved retaliated by kidnapping and possibly killing him, although there is no evidence at this time to tie Ray's case to such criminals. Others speculated that his failure to prosecute Sandusky led some vigilantes or disgruntled individuals to strike back. During the investigation, both Patty and Ray's stepdaughter were asked to take polygraph tests, which they both passed. Ray's case is still being investigated by the Pennsylvania State Police. In January of this year, they posted to social media about a $5,000 reward that was available for information about what became of the 59-year-old. His bank accounts and mobile phone had never been used since he disappeared. Authorities stated that they don't believe Ray's vanishing had anything to do with his work. Anyone with information about Ray's disappearance can call the Pennsylvania State Police tip line at 1-800-472-8477. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching, stay alert, and I'll see you next time.